AM 1220 KHTS. Welcome to Dr. Proctor. Something we do every Thursday afternoon, noon to 1. It's an opportunity to sort of peek over the shoulders of the medical community, support staff, individuals as we age, as our parents age. There's an opportunity for us to learn more, to become better advocates for our parents, for ourselves, for our children, and with everything that's impacted anymore with the medical community, thanks to the idea that everyone has access to healthcare a little more. This impacts doctors. This impacts hospitals. And there are days when, rather than just go to the doctor for anything, the better we can be equipped to take care of ourselves and our loved ones, it helps the medical community give us the best care when we require it. Today in the studio, I have Tracy Hauser. She happens to be one of the most active volunteers at the Santa Clarita Valley Senior Center, for which we are incredibly grateful. But in having had a conversation with her recently about caregiving, it became a much larger conversation that I am always I'm thinking we need to have these conversations again as the population ages, as we ourselves are aging. Where do we go? What do we want? There are conversations that need to take place. And I've invited Tracy here today to talk a little bit about what being a caregiver is, the stresses, the beauty, the darkness, the light, everything that comes with that. So Tracy Hauser, thank you for being here. Get right up on that microphone.
Okay.
Thank you for being here today and offering.
Thank you, T. I appreciate you inviting me. This is really cool.
Now, one of the things that I think frightens most people, I've had many conversations in this rolly chair before with doctors, home health care, palliative, hospice, and I wanted to take an opportunity to really discuss what caregiving is, because it can sound so daunting. Just the idea of being responsible for someone else's care and comfort. I mean, as parents, it's one thing where a child comes into your life and we celebrate that new life and we spend, so many years taking care of that. And then the idea of becoming caregiver again, or if you've never been a parent or have been a caregiver, just the idea of it is completely overwhelming. And you've had the opportunity to do both. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to talk a little bit about from consideration to diagnosis to reality to some of the outcomes that are involved with caregiving. You have had the opportunity, I know I talked with you very briefly. I had the opportunity to take care of my mother-in-law with pancreatic cancer. What were your experiences with caregiving?
Well, first of all, thank you again for giving me the opportunity to speak out and share. I want to start kind of at the beginning. One of the things that really helped me was talking to my girlfriends that had gone through the caregiving process themselves, and I could only listen as an observer, and it's almost like giving birth. You don't know what it's like until you do it. Right. And I remember my one girlfriend telling me, she said, "Tracy, you just can't believe what you're capable of doing when you have to." And she was, talking about, just the nitty gritty, like cleaning up after somebody after their bowels have let loose or their bladder gave way. They don't have control of that, and you're thinking, oh my God, I don't think that's for me. I don't know. There's other people that'll help me with that. Well, then when it's your turn and you're up, it's amazing. For myself personally, I felt like I was transformed into an instrument, and I remember my first day, and I think we were talking about this the other day, I called it the crossover day, when my mom was at the hospital, and I had just stopped in to see her, and she was in bad shape, and there's no way the nurses could have attended to her every couple minutes when her stomach kept erupting, and it was a mess. And I remember taking, and I was dressed for work, and I remember I took off my high heels, I rolled up my pants, I rolled up my sleeves, and I thought, this is what I'm doing today.
This is the moment.
This is the moment, yeah.
But prior to doing that, what you were saying is the support system. The support system and the education and the opportunity to communicate. And I think that is so critically important for anyone who, again, is either even considering what it might be to be a caregiver, or they're being thrown into that position of being a caregiver. Those are some of the most important things. You
hit the nail on the head. It's really, you're pretty much thrown into the position of being a caregiver, I feel, for a lot of people. I know that was the case.
When it happens, yeah. You're
when
thrown
it happens,
into it.
It's your world changes in a New York minute. I remember my mom was always super healthy. Her problem was she had no baseline. And so she was perfectly fine until she wasn't. And
that's often what happens in life. And I think this is why it's so critically important we have these conversations before that day happens.
Absolutely.
Where the ripcord gets pulled and now you have to do this. I feel like repeatedly we, as the children of parents who are of a certain age, or even the husband or wife, or the loved one of, if you have anyone in your life that you feel there might be a possibility that you could be their caregiver, or you might need a caregiver, I think we need to have these conversations.
Really funny you should say that. Yes. And when my mom was sick, that actually opened up a lot of conversations.
And it's not easy to have.
No, they're painful. They're uncomfortable. They're socially what we're not conditioned to. And the reason I was so thrilled when you invited me to come here is I want to share the story, and now I can finally tell it without blubbering, and because it's tough.
I have tissues somewhere.
Yeah, good. I'm going to do my best not to do my Tammy Faye Baker imitation. It's you don't want to think about that. And I remember my daughter saying to me, she's like, "Mom, when you're so certain of something, you're just so certain you'd stake your life on it." And I go, "Yeah." And she goes, "I thought Grandma would live to 90 or 100, and she passed just before she, 2 years ago, she passed just before she turned 82. And 82, relatively speaking, doesn't sound that old.
80 is the new 40. I mean,
at least the new 60.
Right.
For sure.
We have the opportunity to live longer. It's, you can anecdotally, we know that, and statistics show that. But we are these little pink planets, if you peel away the skin, and everything is so intricately wired. Just one thing goes wrong, and next thing you know, the planet spins off its axis. Now, your mother, totally healthy, totally fine. Right. Did you have the conversation about caregiving before that?
No, not at all. I had the good fortune. She actually lived with us. She had a little guest house that she stayed in. So we had kind of the best of all worlds. She had her own privacy, but she was there with us. Mm-hmm. And she had moved down from Northern California. We'd had a bed and breakfast up there, and she had for several years. And when we sold the inn, she said, "I don't want to live alone anymore. I'm kind of done with this." So she moved in with us and was a major,
vibrant, healthy.
Oh my God! Drove the kids around, cooked dinner. I mean, she was we had very much of like a communal type family. Mm-hmm. We had 3 generations, the kids, my kids, my husband and I, and my mom. So it was a huge
What was the
blow.
day that changed?
The day that she was diagnosed with colon cancer. And I remember, God bless Dr. Dario, that he makes house calls. And he had come to the house, and she didn't look good. And I thought, something's up. So Dr. Dario had come to the house, and he knew by looking at her and talking to her, but obviously he didn't make the official call until
testing and everything else
and whatnot.
Done.
But he knew. And in my gut, I knew too. And what was interesting was we took a sick person to the hospital and brought home a frail old lady. I mean, it happened that fast.
It's demoralizing. It
was more.
When you're handed a sentence. Yeah. When you're handed a sentence, and now you realize everything you were has changed in a moment. Yeah. And the idea that she knew she was going to be in your care, she knew that. I've seen it before with countless individuals in my own experience, where once a diagnosis is given, there's that fear of the unknown, there's the fear of the known, that's the most driving factor in that. So now she's been given her, you all know that your life is about to change radically. Right. For you, as a caregiver, what was your thought? What was the first thing that was it the idea of everything's changing, the idea that, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to be the person in the driver's seat. What was that for you?
You know, it's a lot like being in a car accident. It's so disorientating. I didn't know what I thought, and there was a flood of emotion. You know, I couldn't even pick one thing, and it's interesting because I've had a couple years to reflect now, and one of the things that was really important was, thank God I was connected with volunteering for the Senior Center. Little history on me. I adore babies, and I really love elderly people. I think both of them are the closest to the Creator you'll ever get. So
I agree with
those
that.
are my favorite phases
the first
in life.
breath you draw, the last breath you take.
Exactly. And I've always been intrigued with the Senior Center, and I'm going to give a plug for the Senior Center because they were such a major part of my story. When I figured out about the Senior Center, and I was asked to volunteer at an event they did one time, I thought, this is really cool. And I started learning more about it. And a few years ago, we did a little recycling program called Full Cycle, where we had Canyon High School recycling materials. And that was really cool. But, you know, like all things, there wasn't enough people to keep it together. So it kind of went to the sides. And I decided I want to help keep raising money for this organization because they just do great stuff. And I had learned that they had a support group for what they called non-professional caregivers. I thought, well, isn't that interesting? Well,
and you weren't at a place where you needed that yet.
I just thought it was really cool. You know, the fact that they do the home delivered meals, you know, they provide literally hundreds of services for families. And again, it's kind of like the police department and the fire department. You know they're there, you think that's great that we have it, but golly, if your house is on fire, you would never be so happy that fire department's there. And that was kind of like, for us, it was like our family was on fire. You know, when Mom got diagnosed, it's like, holy crap, now what are we going to do? So when she was in the hospital, I started noticing I was having some kind of unsettled feelings. I thought, what in the world, what am I feeling? Well, I was angry at the situation. And I knew I was angry at the situation. And I thought, oh God, I don't want this to bleed over toward her, because I'm not angry at her, but I was angry that she was sick.
And those feelings, I call it an emotional Agent Orange. Once that gets sprayed, it's like, okay, now there's no coming back from that. And it is really, really difficult to imagine how to direct that anger so it doesn't kill everything and it doesn't make everything completely impossible to move forward or grow. And the idea that you were wise enough to say, all right, I don't want to spray this on my mom. I don't want to give this to my family. I don't want to give this to the other support staff. I have to figure that out. And then how did you channel that?
Well, there was actually a couple of things that happened. One of them was, I'm going to backtrack a little bit. The day before, because when she went to the hospital, it was close. I mean, we were very close. Had we waited a day or two longer, she probably would have gone sooner than she did. I had the good fortune of another 2.5 years after the diagnosis. So the day before her surgery, I had gone to church, and I was literally meditating and praying on, like, okay, what do I do with this? And you know how those thoughts will come into your head and you know it's not your own thought? Well, the first thought was, can you love somebody enough to honor their path? And I thought, yeah, I can do that. And then the next thought was, can you love somebody enough to honor their path, whether you like it, whether you agree with it, or whether you understand it? And I'm like, yeah, I think I can do that. The second I had that thought, the next thought was, okay, there's nothing to fix. And that's what I realized is, for our society, and especially women, and men too, for that reason, we want to fix stuff.
It's our job.
And I wanted to fix that. And when I had that, I'll just call it spiritual epiphany, that this wasn't mine to fix.
Right.
It was mine to honor, and it was her path to walk. And that was a big pill to swallow.
And what's really important too in that same vein is that I am a huge, huge fan of the advance directive and the idea that someone does their power of attorney of health care, because you decide your fate. It's between you and your maker, you and your, whatever your spiritual belief is, whatever your core core motor that runs your life. This is for you to decide.
Absolutely.
And if you leave those decisions to your daughter, to your niece, to your husband or wife, they may not always know what your wishes are. And once you put that on paper, you give people the permission to follow that path, to help honor. And I think when we don't have those conversations, that anger that you speak of, especially when it comes to caregiving, now there's no communication. Perhaps there are hurt feelings about, well, what are you going to decide for me? You have to make those decisions. And it's a simple boilerplate document that can be, you can get it off the internet. There's a ton of legal sites, or a simple phone call to an attorney. Do the advance directive, do the power of attorney of healthcare, so that you can decide what's important to you, what you want, what you're willing to take. But the idea that this came to you on your own, to where you said, I'm going to honor what mom's path is. I'm going to honor what mom's journey is and what her wishes are. That's a tremendous shift in caregiving. When you then allow yourself to say, okay, I can't control this. I can't fix it. Maybe I can or can't cure it. I don't have that power. Yeah. This is now out of my control, but I have to honor and give the care that's required. I do believe that's a pivotal moment in caregiving. We have a few moments before we take a break. We're talking with Tracy Hauser, one of my favorite Santa Clarita pillars of the community. She also happens to be a tireless volunteer for the Santa Clarita Valley Senior Center. I'm a huge fan of the Senior Center. I believe every community should have that organization, because it's so much more than...
It's for the families.
It's for the families.
Yeah, the Senior
It's not
Center,
just shuffleboard and Parcheesi.
No. Oh, no, it is not. It is not. And like you said, the advance directive, you said such a mouthful when you said that. I still had to drag my mom down to get an advance directive because of the generation. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to upset the family.
My mother-in-law wouldn't say the C word. And I kept thinking, what? You have cancer. We have to deal with cancer. We have to either kick cancer's butt or we have to make it so that life is what it is, but we have to talk about it.
And that's interesting you say that. I sat in her room until the doctor could come in and tell her she had cancer, because I knew if she heard it without me there, it wouldn't be discussed.
Yeah, it wouldn't be discussed. And when people ask you, how are you? I'm
fine.
I'm fine.
Yeah.
No, you're not fine. And we need to deal with it so that you can be happy, you can be comfortable, you can live an amazing life. But fine is not the answer. And that is really sometimes to get past that stumbling block of, you know what, this is unpleasant, this is icky, and we need to have this conversation. And there are so many more levels to caregiving once that begins. And when we come back from the break, I do want to go over the soup to nuts, the nuts and bolts of what it is to be a caregiver once you're in the trenches. And as you said, you develop a strength. You have no idea what you're capable of doing. You made an interesting point, Tracy, about having a child, even where no one can explain to you what that is.
No,
and
it's a full-on experiential.
It's a full-on experience, and the idea that you're going to have sleepless nights, and you're up for some of it, and you read the books, they tell you some of it, but until you're there, you've no idea what that experience is going to mean to you personally. And caregiving is very much like that. And I like that you said earlier that babies and the elderly are your two favorite, because it's a nurturing thing. And I think people that don't even realize they have a nurturing gene. Sometimes that rises to the top when you actually need it. Yeah. If you don't need it, you don't use it.
That's right.
There are plenty of people out in the world, politicians especially. I don't think they use the nurturing gene till they need it. So we got to give them an opportunity to have that rise up to the front. Again, you're listening to Dr. Proctor. Today we're talking about caregiving and what that is from the time you receive the diagnosis and you realize that you are about to become someone's world. Would you say that would be accurate? Because there is so much to being in that particular driver's seat. But before we go to break, was it one of the best things you ever did too?
I am so grateful that I have that we had that process together, because it was a very bittersweet, and it's through the grieving process, that was actually what got me through, was realizing we did everything we could.
Okay, we're going to talk about what that meant to you and what it meant to the person you were taking care of. You're listening to Dr. Proctor here on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. We'll be back after this business.